So I just want to bring that up because I hear all the time, particularly from women or first gen PR pros of all kind, particularly pros of colors, that second guessing of ourselves, or I don't want to fail, or I don't think I have the skill set for this. And oftentimes we forget to connect the dots of all the experiences we've had that led us to that moment.
Welcome to the Smart Talk series, the show for professionals who want strategies, tips, and real talk about all things PR, marketing, and social media. Your host is Melissa Vella Williamson, an award-winning, accredited, and nationally recognized PR pro and communication thought leader. And now your host, Melissa Vella Williamson.
Hello, and welcome to the Smart Talk series. I'm Melissa Vella Williamson. This season, our focus is on evolving your career. Today, I'm joined by Julie Livingston. Julie Livingston is president of WantLeverage Communications, an entrepreneurial PR and LinkedIn marketing consultancy based in New York City. She specializes in turning under the radar executives and businesses into authoritative industry leaders throughout strategic communication counsel, media placement, and elevating leadership visibility on LinkedIn, the world's biggest business networking platform. Welcome, Julie.
Oh, it's great to be here with you, Melissa.
I'm so excited to speak with you on my medium. Thank you so much for earlier having me on your show on LinkedIn.
Oh, that was so much fun.
Was. So, Julie, tell us more about your background and your work today.
Well, it's interesting how we all got into public relations in the first place, right? So, as a younger person, I had a goal of becoming a fashion editor. And I've grown up in New York. I lived in New York. And so, after an internship at 17 magazine, I got my first job right out of college as a young fashion editor at a fledgling publication called Young Miss. It
Mm.
later became YM. It's no longer in existence, but you might have known it as YM. And what a phenomenal experience that was. I got to do a lot of editorial writing, writing our monthly beauty and fragrance and hair columns. I worked with phenomenal talent, including the young Bobby Brown, the makeup artist, a lot of amazing photographers, including the great Patrick DeMarchelier and many others, and phenomenal young celebrity models, including Whitney Houston, Brooke Shields, and Molly Ringwald, many others. It was a great experience. And so I was constantly being pitched by beauty publicists, beauty and fashion publicists. And I became very intrigued about what they did. And after being an editor for a number of years and getting ready for a change and realizing that I had a knack for writing, and I started exploring going into PR. When I was, way back then, there really wasn't a communications track at the college level. So it was really a developing field. And so I started networking around and eventually got my first public relations job at an industry association called the World Gold Council, which was the industry group for the gold mining industry based in Johannesburg, South Africa. And so that kind of changed the trajectory of everything. I was still sort of in the fashion business, although maybe like a step away because the fine jewelry industry is much more conservative and less fashion focused. But that took me into a great direction. It was very exciting. I was really developing the publicity department at this trade group from the ground up. They had not really done very much with promoting gold jewelry as a self purchase item for women. I literally had a vault in my office the size of a refrigerator filled with jewelry, and I could come in every single day and play dress up. It was unbelievable. I know. It was crazy. So I did that for a number of years. We produced, and we had big budgets in the 80s. We produced major press events and, things that you just really wouldn't see these days anymore. And I really honed my skill at pitching. I developed my PR writing, which is different than editorial writing. and, learned how to use a media database and, which back then was in a book. It was in a printed book. It was not a digital tool at all. So, you know, I got to travel around the globe for that particular job. As I said, the company was based in Johannesburg. Although I did not make it to South Africa, I traveled all across Europe, meeting with my cohorts in other countries. It was wonderful. And after that, I decided I wanted to go into more consumer products. And purely by networking and being tenacious, I landed a job at Liz Claiborne, which at that time was the biggest garment maker in the world, and helped them to launch a new division of the company, a jewelry division. So it was all kind of related to my past work. And at that point, I wasn't doing publicity that much anymore, but I was actually doing product merchandising and sales training. But I was using my publicity skills because I was on a sales floor in major department stores across the nation, 500 of them, that took our new product line. And I had to come up with the talking points and explain how to promote this product and how it coordinated with Liz Claiborne fashion and why it was right for today, for the women of that time in building their own kind of jewelry wardrobe. And so it was just sort of an extension of my experience, my prior experience. After that, I left and started my own consultancy. And I realized, big corporate has not always been for me. And I've now been an entrepreneur three times. This is my third time. But the first time I did it, I was scared to death. I did leave with one small client, a vendor who I had worked with at Liz Claiborne, and I loved it, Melissa. I loved being on my own. I realized I've had an entrepreneurial bent since I was a kid, and I started getting clients, and it was really exciting. In fact, one of my first projects, it was in the jewelry industry. I was sent to the Winter Olympics in Albertville, France. You're not going to believe this, to fit the US Olympic team for their team rings.
I mean, I'm not believing like half of your story here, Julie. So I love that.
It's all true. I was in the most
Why
gorgeous part of
magazines?
I was in the French and Swiss Alps in the winter. It was like a winter wonderland and fitting the athletes for their rings and otherwise just having fun and enjoying the food and the landscape. It was amazing. And I ended up staying in doing a lot of work, consulting work in the jewelry business that for a very long time, more than a decade. So jewelry and luxury goods, luxury watches, and I branched out from PR and continued to do some sales training. Actually, I did a program for the luxury watch brand Piaget. I remember. So I continued to be very diverse in what I could do. And I know we're going to talk later about advice I have for up and coming professionals. And I'm going to talk about being, really having a breadth of experience. I think it brings a lot of richness to who you are as a publicist. But, after that, 9/11 hit. And I lived in New York City, just 3 miles away from where the towers fell at the time. I had two young kids and my business dried up. And my husband was also in his own business. It was a very dark time. And so I decided to close my business down. And I was very fortunate. I mean, this was months after 9/11. I got a phenomenal job at Scholastic through networking. I had been involved in New York Women in Communications, and somebody on the board of directors worked at Scholastic and was recruiting for a director of corporate communications, and she hired me. And I'll tell you, it was a big relief because, as I said, the city, New York City, it took a while to recover from 9/11. So worked at Scholastic, and that was a very interesting job. I got to oversee the PR for the community relations initiative. So I was working with all the major nonprofits like Save the Children. Reading is fundamental. I did this amazing program with Shaquille O'Neal called The Biggest Children's Book in the World, where we created a book that was bigger than him, where kids would submit their dreams for a better world. And I worked with Volunteers of America on a prison reading initiative and lots of wonderful, wonderful things, really rich, interesting work. Unfortunately, it was another big company and I did not care for the bureaucracy at all. I worked with some very rough people. And so I I left just, I don't know, maybe less than 2 years, and I had been the longest in that position, believe it or not, so that's not saying too much, for the organization, but I moved on to the Toy Association,
I saw
um,
that.
which is the industry group for the North American toy industry. I've had so much fun,
I
along the
mean,
way.
that's everyone's, every baby from the 80s, right? It's like or
So I did
90s. It's
that
like
and,
you saw big and you wanna do that. Yeah.
that I got more back into traditional PR, and I really turned the annual New York Toy Fair, which is this humongous industry event that takes up the whole Jacob Javits Convention Center, into an international media magnet, attracting journalists from around the globe who were scouting youth trends, information, the latest information on manufacturing and safety standards from the US, the biggest market in the world. It was phenomenal. I was their national media spokesperson. At that point in my career, I had amassed a lot of experience on camera as a spokesperson. Way back at the World Gold Council, I actually would go on QVC as on a regular basis and represent the gold industry. So I knew how to talk. Even with my New York accent, I did it all. And so for Toy Fair, I did a lot of media work. One of the things I'm very proud of is that there was a major product recall. So the job was very interesting because it dealt with not only product publicity, but manufacturing, safety standards. I was working with the US Consumer Safety and Product Commission. So it was a lot of government interface. And I found it all really, really interesting. So 21 million toys were recalled because of lead paint. And the recall happened the first day I started graduate school, my
Wow.
graduate program. While I was at the Toy Association, I started at Syracuse and in an executive program. And the first day, the recalls happened. So I got an amazing experience in crisis communication. We managed through the crisis. We came out of it well. So that was a fascinating thing. And after the Toy Association, I ended up at a small agency. And I pivoted again, Melissa, and started doing business development. Somebody had contacted me and said, well, you know everybody in the industry, in the toy industry. I want to get more toy clients. I'd like you to help me. And I thought, well, I've never really sold before. She said, you can do it. I had
It's
the world, I had the
yeah.
contacts, but I just never thought of myself in that way.
Which is
Uh,
funny. I just wanna stop here,
yeah,
Julie, so that everyone can take this moment in with me. You literally talked about working on the floor doing sales, but it's enlightening to hear you say that you thought at that moment, "Well, I haven't really done sales before." But as one of the things I wrote down in my notes to bring up was that, yes, sales is a huge part of this
it
career.
really is.
Just
It
being
really
able
is. Yeah,
to sell our ideas and close them and the timeliness
totally.
of it and the passion behind it and so that's I just want to bring that up because I hear all the time, particularly from women or first gen PR pros of all kind, particularly pros of colors, that second guessing of ourselves, or I don't want to fail, or I don't think I have the skill set for this. And oftentimes we forget to connect the dots of all the experiences we've had that led us to that moment.
Oh, I'm hearing you say that very deeply because I think that I probably suffer from some of that myself, that imposter syndrome. I know so many women have that. But, even though I did have that issue, I went ahead and, embraced this new challenge and did it really well. My first year, I was very successful for this little agency. I brought in, I don't know, close to $250,000 in new business from major brands, including Toyota, Cold Stone Creamery, and others. So it was pretty exciting. So after that, I've kind of gone in and out of entrepreneurial work. I've worked in the nonprofit space for a little while, leading a marketing communications team. And then about 8 years ago, I started WantLeverage Communications. I kept being drawn back to, to this entrepreneurial thing. I guess I'm booked on it. And I am very self driven. I'm super creative. I'm not somebody who really fits into a very, a narrow kind of a box. And I think that's always the problem I had with being in big corporate was that, first of all, it was highly competitive. The people were not always very kind or supportive. And sometimes I think they didn't know what to do with me. I
Yeah.
was able to do so many different things well that it was like, no, you can't do that. You can only do this. And it was stifling at
Uh,
times.
I relate to that so much,
Yeah,
Julie. And
it was stifling. I think one of
absolutely.
the great skills that successful PR people have, Melissa, is that we are good at a lot of different things. We have multiple competencies because we're always juggling so many different facets of every program we run. Wouldn't you agree?
Yeah, absolutely. And I want to say that, not everyone is or can be an entrepreneur. And I want to respect that and honor that. Majority of my career had been in traditional employee jobs, but I always had, like you said, that entrepreneurial mindset and spirit. And that led me into being loved by the best of supervisors, right, and employers, but also there was that sense of, "We don't know what to do with you, you little unicorn, you," right? But they didn't know what to do with me
Yes, the
because
unicorn. It's the
I would
unicorn thing.
I would take off so quickly. Oh, and now I call myself a racehorse. Now I'm embracing that story. Like, well, you know
I
what?
like how you turn that around.
I'm a pace setter. Like, if
Yeah.
people can't keep up or don't want to keep up, like, that's okay. It's okay what we all bring to this work. But what I want to say is that I think, particularly as we get older, that I want us to be more empowered to embrace our natural gifts of who we are. I think, yeah, I do go fast. And yeah, I had the same kind of struggles of being said, this is your lane and you can only drive in this lane. But I have a good idea for that department. Or I think we should all collaborate this way. Or what if, and it was all the ideas in some situations that were either intimidating to
Yeah,
others,
yeah.
for whatever reason, upsetting to others. When I was always so curious about why can't this we come together? Why can't we make something?
Absolutely.
Yeah,
You
so I
also,
understand it.
you just said something that I also think is such a critical skill for people in our space, and that is curiosity. And that is something that has driven me from the time I was in my 20s when I started to now. I am still so highly curious about everything.
Yeah.
I'm sort of a culture freak. I love New York City culture. I just inhale it. And I think that's what makes me a good publicist too.
Yeah, absolutely. I say that makes us communicators that are creative and have that curiosity to keep learning and doing and trying and evolving, I think is amazing. And what I want to do with this season is really have us all take a minute and a breath to think about our careers. Are we in the place we want to be? What might that next step be? And it's not always that step up on this very linear, clear ladder, but maybe that's a step in a new direction. And I definitely want to explore that with you. So what inspired this evolution from working in this traditional, I guess, PR role or and then client side, which you kind of talked about, but starting your firm and then walking further into LinkedIn and saying, I'm a
Yeah.
LinkedIn expert. Let's talk about it.
I've been doing a lot of thinking about this over the last few years, and I realized that as a young kid, I had a fantasy of a company called JL Inc.
Hmm.
I used to write about it in my little writing notebook. I used to write stories about it, and I had no idea what it was, but I think that was always in my heart and my soul. As a young teenager at 13, I became the first paper delivery girl in my neighborhood. This was the time of women's lib, so it was kind of a big deal that I was the first girl delivering newspapers every day. So I think I've always wanted to be in charge and kind of follow my own path and make my own money. And so I've done a lot. I've always been really flexible. And as I said, I have enormous curiosity. So there are a lot of different businesses that interested me. I have a lot of different personal hobbies and I don't know, whatever. I always had lots of different things I wanted to try and do. And, my dad always encouraged me to pursue my passions. So one was writing, did that as a young fashion editor. The other was fashion, you know. I loved the fashion business, and then I realized it was really too tough for sensitive me. So did that for a while. But, I've always pursued the things I loved, and I think that has always led me to keep striving and keep looking for something new and exciting and interesting. Every job I've had, every role I've had has been so multifaceted, and I was always able to kind of mold it and shape it to fit my particular talents, but also to keep growing. I wasn't somebody who wanted to do the same thing every day forever. I wanted to do something different. I wanted my roles to always evolve. And so I think, after working in big corporate, realizing that wasn't such a fit, although I did try it, like 3 times, I really didn't care for it, Melissa. I tried to like it. I loved the benefits. The benefits were awesome. Some of the work was really fascinating, particularly at Scholastic. The work was so interesting.
No, I would have loved that.
But, the people were impossible. The bureaucracy was impossible. I couldn't stand it. I couldn't get anything done.
Yeah, that's what it goes back to pace. I was like, why is this taking so long? Why do we have to ask 50
Forget it.
people?
I got so tired of that.
I hear you.
And so that's what really led me to just take a shot and start with one client and just keep building it. And I've just kept reinventing myself over and over and over the course of several decades.
Hi, this is Anais Vieta Miracle, a proud supporter of the Smart Talk series. As a sponsor, I would like to share a few organizations I support, and they include Southwest Key Programs, the Hispanic Women's Network of Texas, Fierce Mujeres, and the Hispanic Public Relations Association, HPRA, the Texas chapter. Please find out more information about these organizations in the show notes. And thank you to Melissa Vela Williamson, a steadfast leader in the space of Hispanic public relations and public relations overall. And thank you for all that you do for Latinas like myself in public relations.
Yeah. So what about LinkedIn has inspired you to really focus in on that?
Well, a few years ago, I started amping up my presence on LinkedIn as a way of hunting down new clients and telling people about my services. And people started to notice. They really liked my content. And it was sort of inadvertent. And somebody who was a client prospect of mine, I had met her about a decade earlier in another world, another time and place. She had never actually hired me, but apparently had been continuing to follow me on LinkedIn. She was now in a different role. She was the chief communications officer at a Fortune 50 company, so a very large organization. And her boss, the chief customer officer, really needed, and after the pandemic, to build a sense of community and a sense of belonging among a very large field force of tens of thousands of employees, to bring them together as a way to positively affect employee attrition, which was rising as a result of the stress of the pandemic and so on. And my colleague said she knew just who to call because of my content. So this was, Melissa, I had no inclination toward creating LinkedIn content. But as a publicist, I realized that I bring a lot to that because I have for decades been guiding senior leaders on how to present themselves to the media, how to cultivate their reputation. And it's kind of the same on LinkedIn. So anyway, she hired me and now we're in the second year of the program and the results have been amazing. So I developed the LinkedIn content strategy for this executive. And then I do the ghostwriting for her. So I write her posts on 3 consecutive days a week. And when I was developing the content strategy, I identified, we talked about her personal brand values, what she wanted to stand for. And a woman in a male-dominated industry really has to think about this long and hard.
Yeah.
So because women have particular skills that in the past were not really put up on a pedestal, but are now highly valued. And that is, one of them is emotional intelligence and all the people skills that corporations used to downplay, which are now the most coveted skills a leader can have. And so we identified her content pillars as a result of agreeing on her personal brand values. And then I started writing the content. A year and a half later, she is now the 3rd most followed executive at that company on LinkedIn.
Wow. Incredible.
And the engagement has just been amazing. Now, when she travels around the country to her field offices all the time. And quite frankly, people used to shake in their boots when she'd walk in. She's so high up, you know,
Mhm.
people were a little afraid of her. But the LinkedIn content has positioned her as being so much more approachable and accessible. And people go up to her now and say, I really get so much value out of your LinkedIn content. I look forward to reading it. I make it my business to read it every day. I share it with my team. I feel like I know you.
Yeah,
Like,
absolutely.
wow. So it's really done something very important for her. And I realized that I had a knack for doing it. And so it's now become a very big focus of my business because LinkedIn has become a critical PR platform for executives and brands and companies today.
I would absolutely agree with that. I think it's tough trying to be strategic in the social media space because so much of what people want to measure are the wrong things. Like they're like, well, look how many followers this person has on Facebook or LinkedIn or whatnot. And now we've got to consider threads and where Twitter's at and what's not. And I'm like, my favorite all day long is LinkedIn.
Yeah.
Why? And I'll be honest with you, because I want to do business. In business, I'm here to talk about professional topics and I want to have a professional exchange and smart talk conversation. That's not exactly happening on some of these other channels. Number
No,
one.
no.
Number two, if you are a woman, let's just be straight, Julie. The propositions I get are quite different on LinkedIn versus Instagram. It could be a literally
Absolutely.
the same
Yeah,
photos, and y'all know what I'm talking about. So,
absolutely. It's
and
more serious. It's a little more serious.
there's less drama, it's more serious, and that's I see pros bring a little more of their personal life. I think that has to be thought about
Absolutely.
intentionally because there is some who are just doing that creep,
It
and
is
I'm like,
not Facebook,
it's
and people often forget
not.
about that.
It's not, and I think, I wanted to ask you with that, the really impressive results you received for your clients and that client story, was that more on the LinkedIn posts you wrote, like the post in the feed or the blog post kind of feature, article feature they have?
I do not do articles for her, just posts.
Wow. Yeah, because when those articles came out and then those were linked to their newsletter, I saw people getting a lot of views
You know,
that way, but it's
we
so much
have
work.
thought about doing that, but we haven't for a
Mhm.
lot of reasons, but it's really the posts. And
Yeah.
at this point, well, one of the reasons I really enjoy doing the work is because it is so measurable. And that's always been a difficulty with other traditional PR work that we do. We know that with media relations, it is very difficult to measure the results of that work. It could take months, even years to get a particular media placement.
Yeah.
And so what do you tell the client? That it's taken me that long? No, the client wants to see results immediately.
Yeah.
And how do you relate that placement back to sales or, reach? It's difficult. It's always been a very questionable thing. The PR industry has, you know, grappled with this forever. And so LinkedIn, I can measure my outcomes and I know I'm now able to track content trends. I know the topics that people are going to go crazy over.
Mhm.
The posts that have gotten more than 100,000 impressions are like, wow, I want to remember that particular topic and reinvent it in some way because people obviously want to hear more about that.
Yeah,
Um,
that's
you know,
that's inspiring what your content is. I love that. And actually kudos to your client for giving that executive that support because back to the bureaucracy type situations in some organizations that they don't really let all the leaders have that microphone. They don't always let them have that investment in the spotlight. And often it's gonna be women or often, right, those that are a little fewer in the organization. So that's really awesome that because a lot of times the leaders you see with that kind of support have their own business. And so I really love that you're
well, in
doing
a
that.
way, she is sort of she is the business sector leader. And look, everything that I write for them, there's a long approval process. She has to review it, the comms team has to look at it, legal has to approve it. But it's been pretty smooth sailing for me, I have to say. They still really like what I do, and we're very much in alignment in terms of the content development.
That's brilliant. And I love it. There's a proactive stance on that work. So, with your business now, Julie, like how are you deciding which services to offer in this phase of your career? Are you able to curate that a little bit more?
Well, Melissa, I've always been somebody with their ear to the ground. And as I said, I have this enormous sense of curiosity, and I just keep following what's going on. I'm learning more about AI. I actually, as you were a guest on my LinkedIn live show, PR Patter. I've done 3 shows now on artificial intelligence, and that is gonna have it is already having a big impact on the public relations world. I'm using it a lot as a thought starter kind of a tool, as a research tool. So I think I'm just going to continue being very flexible and resilient. And I happen to really enjoy this work. I don't know. I'm just going to keep doing it. I think LinkedIn is going to continue to be a very important PR platform. Even more so, I was actually talking to 2 young friends the other night, and one of them works at TikTok and one of them works at Yahoo.
Mhm.
And they were saying that in their performance reviews now, they are being encouraged to be more visible on LinkedIn.
Wow.
Yeah.
Even from TikTok, huh?
Yep.
She says, "Well, let me just post my TikTok video on LinkedIn."
No,
I know, I
it's
know.
on LinkedIn.
Wow, that's incredible. I love it. I love that there's less drama and we can really have a better exchange in that way. But besides LinkedIn, I gotta ask you that question, Miss PR Patter. In PR, we know we're always fighting against that. All we do is media relations or PR equals media coverage, whatnot. But as far as that pressure in your career, do you get asked for that kind of help or how do you manage that?
I do. I still do the traditional PR things for clients, and media placement is absolutely one of them. But I see it as a bigger thought leadership piece. That's really where I think executives as brand ambassadors and companies need to be these days, and is in the thought leadership place. They need to really promote who they are and what their values are, because customers want to know. Customers are more discerning, whether they're consumers or B2B customers. They want to know who they're buying from. They want to know the people behind the product and services. So I think it's thought leadership. And so, you can promote your thought leadership in a lot of different ways. LinkedIn is one platform. But yeah, I just recently placed a byline article for a client on Thrive Global, on Chief.com, on a number of, I do it all the time. And I think that is very valuable. It continues to be valuable. I'm using video more for thought leadership because, again, showing the person and their manner of speaking, their tone, the way they gesticulate and express themselves, I think is a really wonderful way to promote thought leadership. So it's what we do is way more than media placement. It's really helping executives and organizations to cultivate their brand image and their reputation in a consistently and in an ongoing way to support all of their brand values and to keep them very, very present for their customers.
Yeah, absolutely. And being willing to pay for that opportunity when it makes strategic sense.
That's right.
Our clients have to be prepared for that, or organizations have to be prepared for that. Because I even like the terminology media placement. Now, I don't know, Julie, if that means you paid for that
Right.
placement
A
or
lot of
not,
times
right?
now, today, a lot of times you have to.
Well, and if you want to guarantee it, absolutely. Because what that can do for you. And often when there's payment, I've found in advertising, anytime we've paid for those spots or opportunities, there is measurement with it. There's a guarantee of delivery time, where and how it's going to be placed. And controlling the controllables is a big part of our work. So I think just putting that public relations point of view on this, on every aspect of thought leadership and how we perform it, kind of opens up the conversation a bit.
I totally agree with you.
Great.
I think we're often a resource for our clients and customers. I mean, we're like the big idea people, and we often present them with opportunities and initiatives and ideas that they haven't thought about before.
Yeah, those are always fun. I love that part
Yeah,
of the work. So, we need some advice, Julie. What advice do you have for any kind of PR or comms pro, or really any pro who might be interested in exploring a career evolution?
sure. Well, I have a couple of things that I would say. First of all, continue to be curious and fuel your own curiosity. Read a lot, get immersed in popular culture and business news, and most importantly, you have to keep up with technology. I cannot tell you how many PR professionals I know who don't know how to use LinkedIn. I mean, it sounds crazy to me, but they really don't know the platform. They don't know anything about AI. I mean, come on. You have to keep up with the news and what's happening in our very fast changing world and how those things apply to marketing and PR. So keep up with technology. Doesn't matter how old you are. Just experiment with it. And you don't have to be an absolute expert in it all, but know enough about it. Get on threads. Just try everything. Try AI tools just to know what they are, what they can offer you. I also think that keeping up with your education is important. I know that you're an APR. I actually have not gone for that, but I did go for get my master's in communications management from Syracuse, from the Newhouse School just 12 years ago. So I did it later in my career, because I think that to be in our field is to be constantly learning. And when you're learning, new avenues of opportunity just automatically open for you. Your mind is just more alive. And I just think that, it's just such an important lifelong thing to keep on learning. I know that my graduate program has ongoing education. So it's not over just because you got the degree. Take a class, just a one-off class, an adult ed class, and something you didn't know about. Or if you're interested in a different field, take a class and experiment. And there are so many online learning opportunities now. There are so
Absolutely.
many things. And certainly get involved in professional organizations or networking groups. I'm in a great one now called the Quorum Initiative, which is a small women's leadership organization that is just so refreshing because the women in this group, who are of all ages and stages of their careers, really speak openly and honestly with each other. They don't sugarcoat things. We share information in a real way. And it has been so valuable to me. And there's been a lot of professional development opportunities with that small organization. I cannot tell you how much value I've gotten out of it.
I love that. Yes. Send me an invite if I can do that
I
from
will. I
from
definitely will.
from this camera, from Zoom, because I'm always looking for these new
It's a
allies and
great one.
friends. That's
It is a
great.
great one.
Well, and I really agree with your points here. I think just having that, I've heard the mindset's called a million things. In fact, when I was writing my book, which was a great learning opportunity for me.
Mhm.
Believe me, if I have a
Yeah.
client, thought leadership, and I coached a former client onto how to get started writing their book, is this concept of always learning, right? This growth mindset, like you're not done, or
You're never
learner
done.
mindset. I was playing with that language, but I just want people to be open to that because you just don't know where that could absolutely take you. So I love all this, Julie. I love to also ask all my guests one question because I'm kind of curious and fascinated by this concept. But what does smart talk mean to you?
Smart talk to me means taking a strategic approach to communications and really thinking about it, doing critical thinking around everything that you do. Think about it from both sides. How are you going to package the information? How might it be received by different audiences? And smart talk also means to me having really intimate customer knowledge and knowing how your customers are changing, how their needs are changing, and staying very, very close to them. Whether you're doing, deep listening on social media or having one-to-ones with them, but really staying in tune with what your customers want and not getting carried away with what you think your customers should want
Yeah,
So many
absolutely.
companies and brands they just forget about the customers. They're so busy, doing their own thing that it's really customers change over time. But I
Yeah.
think that critical thinking is something that I hope, I feel like I've cultivated over these decades that I've worked in the field. And then I think that is one of the most critical skills for smart talk, for really being smart about your communications and marketing.
Yes, thank you. Let's think about it. Let's be strategic. Let's be critical of ourselves first and then,
You could
others too.
always do it better or differently.
That's right. So, Julie, I think I kind of know the answer to this, but what's the best way for listeners to connect with you?
Well, guess what I'm going to say? They can
Uh,
find me on LinkedIn. I love making new contacts and connections. Find me on LinkedIn. Check out PR Patter, which is my weekly show on PR and marketing. And I think that's the easiest way. My website is wantleverage.com.
Wonderful. We'll have it in the show notes too, Julie. Well, thank you so much for sharing your knowledge and all your passion with us today.
This has been awesome. Thanks so much, Melissa.
Thanks to our listeners for joining me for today's episode. We love diving deep into communication topics to elevate our industry practice. You can work with me as a trainer, consultant, or hire my firm, MVW Communications, for strategic planning or PR strategy services. In case you missed it, Smart Talk, Public Relations Essentials All Pros Should Know is out. You can buy your print or audiobook copy to get award-winning advice, lessons, and tools about all things public relations. Available on Amazon or get an autographed copy at mvw360.com/book. Grab your copy there and please leave us a review. It would mean the world to me and helps more aspiring or working professionals find us. And as always, think smart and communicate smart. And I'll see you next time.
Thank you for joining us for another episode of the Smart Talk series. If you learned something or enjoyed our conversation, share it on social media or send to a friend. To learn more about this and other communication topics, visit mvw360.com. That's mvw360.com.